Hi everybody, today's episode is another subscriber request. It's a song called Here Comes Bob. Shout out to the Tragic Youth for requesting this. So once again, this is a meta and self-referential interpretation of a SPARKS song, and this song's really bloody great. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe and comment. And please check out some of my other videos, because taken in isolation, this all sounds a bit batshit. But the themes I talk about here come up time and time again in SPARKS music. So let's not hang about, because here comes Bob.
When I spot the driver with a second glance, foot to floorboard impact soon achieved. But here comes Bob. I ain't subtle in my ways of making friends.
This song is about Bob, and Bob has a really unusual habit. He likes to meet new people by causing road accidents. And here we hear him turning on the charm.
Girl, this rubbledness was caused by my neglect. Of course I'll pay, and by the way, my dear, here comes Bob. I ain't subtle in my ways of making friends, no.
Ron Mael is really great at writing these cartoonish characters, but I wonder if there's more to it, because a lot of Bob's traits align well with Halfnelson at that period. It aligns with how they presented themselves to the world. Because if this song is talking about car crashes, then that's something that this band used to relish in.
There was a papier-mâché boat. Russell would sit in this boat and be towed across the floor by the roadie.
I got in it as if it was like a Rose Parade float, and I was waving to the audience as the captain of the slow boat.
And about 3 feet later, he'd have to stop because it would be the end of the stage.
Eccentric and confusing, somehow amateurish and accomplished at the same time. And there was a real sense that all of this could come off the rails at any point.
There we are, playing for this redneck audience that had been there to come to see a band called Cold Blood. Needless to say, they did not like us very much.
I used to, as part of the stage act, have this giant wooden sledgehammer. It was like really heavy mallet on it.
He'd throw the sledgehammer up in the air and catch it, but this time he didn't catch it. Came down slam on his head.
So Bob gets people's attention with a big car crash, and so did Halfnelson. They ain't subtle. Now don't get me wrong, the music is great. It all stands up really well, but it's very strange. Here Comes Bob is from album number 2, called A Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing, and this was even more strange and jarring than their first album. This is how Ron puts it.
In a way, that album is even more eccentric, I think, than the first album. And so, you know, it was really inspiring to us to know that they were giving us this permission to kind of commit self-destruction.
Ron talks about this album as having permission to commit self-destruction, which is helpfully visualised by Edgar Wright with an actual car crash. So think about it this way. Their debut album bombed. It didn't do anything. And instead of polishing up their sound like a normal band would, instead of making it more palatable, they doubled down on the absurdity. It was really brave for a band with no hits, especially because this album is full of great hooks, but obfuscated and made weird. So Halfnelson weren't subtle in their way of making friends, as in making connections, something that's essential for a new band starting out. So it can be about a kind of networking, trying to get noticed and performing. And this resonates with a line that comes later on in the song.
It's hard to make acquaintances in our big town. Most guys stare at nothing much at all. But here comes Bob. I ain't subtle in my ways of making friends.
They live in a big town, Los Angeles, but it's hard to make acquaintances, as in it's hard to get noticed as a band because most eyes stare at nothing much at all. As in people glaze over, but not with Bob and not with Halfnelson. They make an impression, even if that impression is confusion. But the important thing is that they make an impact with their music.
Foot to floorboard impact soon achieved.
So obviously this line is set in the car, But what if the inspiration for it came from Ron sat at his piano? Instead of a gas pedal, it's a sustain pedal. He's using it to make the piano ring out, causing an impact on his audience. So what I'm getting at here is that Halfnelson were really brave. Ron and Russell are capable of writing more instant and accessible pop songs, as we saw on Kimono My House, which came out shortly after this. But from what Ron said earlier, they were happy to confound people. And I think it's fair to say that this attitude can be seen throughout their career.
That is what I had intended to be drunk. A little change in character, I'm pretending to be drunk.
It's easy to think of this as a misstep. The bad hair, the audacious suits, and worst of all, that fake tan. But what if that is what they intended? What if this is pretending? It feels different if you look at this performance in the context of a Halfnelson performance. Again, they're happy to confound their audience. It's like the act they're playing for this version of Sparks is supposed to look like the band getting it completely wrong. They even say this.
Next time I portray a self-sophisticated hunk.
So after pretending to be drunk, or pretending to be a bit of an embarrassment really on pulling rabbits out of a hat, they're going to move on to portray a suave, sophisticated hunk. And this is the cover of the follow-up music that you can dance to. So in my view, it's worth treating Sparks as a kind of performance art where they're playing with audience expectation. It's as if their popularity as a band is less important to them than the impact that they cause. And now let's scale this idea up some more, because Here Comes Bob is a song about car crashes. So let's look at a different kind of crash. Let's look at plane crashes. First, there's the cover of 1975's Indiscreet album, followed in 1980 by the title of Terminal Jive. This is a pun on terminal dive, which is when a plane nosedives and can't recover from it, resulting in a crash. Then finally, there's the song Aeroflot from the album Balls in the year 2000. It's all about the airline that holds the record for the most fatalities by a long stretch. And these three albums have something in common. They were all in some way less successful than their predecessor and followed soon after by a complete reinvention. Indiscreet was undoubtedly brilliant but had no singles. Terminal Jive had bad vibes around it and Balls felt like a misstep. So what if that was part of a performance again? Bob crashing his car. Could it be that Sparks were intentionally crashing the plane in order to facilitate these reinventions? They build an audience, intentionally lose them, and then move somewhere new. This isn't a conclusion I've drawn just from the plane crash imagery. I've got episodes looking in depth at the lyrics. And all of these albums seem to be aware that they're on a downward trajectory, but better things are ahead. So these albums are, in some ways, designed to fail.
They're designed to break, they're designed to break. They're designed to fail, they're designed to fail.
So it's quite an interesting idea, I think, that the band are actively looking for ways to get things slightly wrong, and by doing so, they've produced a body of work that, in my view, is unrivaled.
I want a big surprise tonight.
The record comes out in the heat of punk rock, and an album that could not sound more out of sorts with that.
Where is that goddamn ingenuity?
And something else I find interesting is Sparks very rarely write songs that feel biographical. They don't sound like they're first person. But in recent years, they've released 3 songs like this, all of which seem to celebrate losing.
Gonna run, gonna fly, gonna do things my own way. Fall behind, bye bye bye, gonna do things my own way. All that we've done, we've lost, we've won. All that and more. I may be wrong, I'll pay for it, I'll pay for it. No choke down song, I'll pay
It sounds like it's a price for they're willing to pay to throw hurdles in their own path at every opportunity, sacrificing commercial and even critical success in the name of keeping that spark alive. So when they say that they'll do things their own way, I think it's a lot more than a platitude, because this is a band who have lost and they have won, and we know all that. But there's more. And another interesting side of this is the idea that they're planning ahead, that they're not just working on the current album, they're thinking about what Sparks will be in the future. And that's an area that Here Comes Bob covers quite well. So let's give the next verse a listen.
Sometimes I will stoop to hitting two-door coupes without the frills, but that is just for casual acquaintances, for stripped-down thrills. Your car, girl, or mine, it doesn't matter, no. But for affairs with staying power, I go after limousines. It's always nice when something big is acting as your go-between. And for a group encounter, I'll hit buses, mobile homes, or trains to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That was more of Bob manufacturing these encounters, and not every car crash is the same, they all serve different needs. He starts with two-door coupes without the frills, so cheap cars, very much in the spirit of the Halfnelson albums, which you could describe as cut-down frills. But for affairs with staying power, he goes after limousines, as in hitting big, like Kimono that followed. He says it's always nice when something big is acting as your go-between, and these successful albums sustained Sparks while they put out several albums that didn't quite make it. And again, there's something pretty profound in that, if it's correct. Because not only do they know that that Halfnelson music they're working on right now is cheap and cut down, they know that in the future they'll be able to hit big with something like Kimono My House. It would show such amazing confidence in their own skills as songwriters and performers. And it's another tidbit that suggests that they knew that the Halfnelson albums weren't going to blow up the world. It says that they're happy being a small and obscure band, which leads nicely into this verse.
Instant adulation comes to some at birth. 1, 2 queens are corporate entities. But here comes Bob.
Instant adulation comes to some at birth, but not Sparks, because they had these two flop records as Halfnelson. And from what Ron said in the quote from the Sparks Brothers documentary, they were happy to commit self-destruction, even before they had a hit record. So rather than instant adulation, Sparks go for a kind of delayed gratification.
For a group encounter, I'll hit buses, mobile homes, or trains to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
This is a different type of car crash. This is for group encounters, or to put it another way, is Bob finding an audience. In fact, it's a series of audiences. And Sparks' relationship with the general public is unlike that of any other bands, because what most bands do is grow an audience and nurture an audience. So the Beatles or Queen essentially had the same audience throughout their career, expanding or contracting as they went along. That's how it worked for almost all bands, but with Sparks it was more akin to a hit and run. Several times over they would hit big somewhere and then disappear from view, only to resurface in another part of the world. So it's a series of group encounters. And all of these encounters were very short-lived to their audiences, and quite humble, like buses, mobile homes, or trains to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Someday they'll put me away, I'll think back on active days. Most were worth the minor scars, some were worth the damaged cars. And the judge will say to me, Bob, you've got a bad means to a worthwhile end, an end, but here comes Bob.
Taken on face value, this closing verse is about a future where Bob is answering for his crimes. He's been arrested and he's facing the judge, but everybody seems to agree that it was all worthwhile. However, if you take Bob to actually be Ron, and he's writing about this utterly unique story of Sparks that he plans to both write and to live, then this can be the end of the Sparks story. Someday he'll be put away, as in retirement. And at that time, he's confident that if he looks back, then the price that he's paid will be worth it. Most were worth the minor scars, some were worth the damaged cars. And with a damaged car, you're not really going anywhere, which was the position Sparks found themselves in several times during their career. And the judge says, Bob, you've got a bad means to a worthwhile end. And the words an end are repeated and so emphasised. And I think there's a really great reason for this, because I think that Sparks have got an end planned for the Sparks story. And what's more, even here on album number 2, they had an end plan. Now, I'm not saying that they knew at this point that in 2026, over 50 years later, that they'd still be going. But I think there's a concept to Sparks. They were planned from the start to be a band who'd get thrown again and get back on again over and over. They'd change and they'd find new audiences, and they'd somehow avoid the big time right up till the last moment, at which point they'll show the world the real Sparks, the unfiltered and unrestrained Sparks. And it's only then that we'll be able to judge them, because it's only then that we, the audience, will see the full picture. And I believe this is followed up over 50 years later on this song. This is called Don't Dog It.
Don't dog it, don't dog it, don't dog it, it's Judgment Day. Don't dog it, don't dog it, don't dog it, now step away.
That's a track from Sparks' 2025 album called Mad, and like several Sparks albums, there are lots of songs that seem to call forward to future events. And in this case, I think is calling forward to the end of the Sparks story. It's Judgment Day, when the true nature of the band will be shared with the world. So it can suggest that this is what Sparks are currently writing and currently implementing. It's the conclusion to their own story. And hopefully the judge will say to them that it was a bad means to a worthwhile end. But they mustn't dog it. And that is slang. It means to do less than the required amount, to loaf or to shirk. I take it as meaning that throughout their career, Sparks have somehow hampered their own progress from a traditional point of view. They've avoided becoming as successful as they could be. But now it's Judgment Day. It has to be pure, unrestrained Sparks. It's Sparks firing on all cylinders. And he says to just step away, suggesting that previously Sparks would write these amazing songs and then find interesting ways to mess them up, filling them with these idiosyncrasies that would turn off the average listener. So personally, I'm really excited for whatever Sparks do next. And I've got one more song that I want to look at, and it's one that came out just a few months ago. Remember that Bob makes all these friends by finding different cars to crash into. And that's a metaphor to say that there are just so many ways that you can mess up.
Doing when you should be throwing, staying when you should be going. So very easy to mess up, mess up. Ending when you should be lauding, doing when others are applauding. Always a sign of a mess up, mess up. Run far away, run and then hide. Hope that someday your shame subsides. In time, your shame subsides. In time, your shame subsides.
There are so many ways you can mess up, and I think the Sparks have tried every single one of them. Yet somehow they consistently produce this fantastic, catchy, thought-provoking music. Like Bob, they seem to be impervious to shame, because in time, they know that it'll subside. And that brings today's episode to a close. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed what you've seen, please like and subscribe and comment. And I've got tons of these videos that I'd be really grateful if you could give those a chance too. So thanks everybody for your time, and I'll catch you later.
Bob, you've got a bad means to a worthwhile end.